Hi, my name is Glenna Titus, and I'm here on behalf of ICM. On behalf of ICM and JRLC, we're glad to see faces that understand the need. So, Dan?
Very good, thank you.
Mhm.
Now we can get caught up. What we'll do is we're here from the Jewish Community Relations Council. The idea or the behind what we want to do today is share information from the federal grant that's coming out, so everybody has a good understanding of how to go through the process. It can be complicated if you don't know the finer points to it, but once we explain it, it really is not that bad. But before we get into that, we'll introduce ourselves. So to my left.
My name is Anthony Sussman. I've worked at the Jewish Community Relations Council for 13 years in the areas of community security and communications, and have worked with this grant program since 2007.
I'm Ethan Roberts. I'm the Director of Government Affairs. I've been at the JCRC since 2007. And given that this is a program which is allocated from the government, funding from Congress, and we've also in the past and hopefully in the future will supplement those dollars with state dollars, I'm involved in that perspective.
We had said it before, but this is a non-formal informational meeting to learn about the 2019 grant that's coming through nonprofit. Security grant it's called. So my name is Dan Pleckenpole, and I'm the new Director of Security with the Jewish Community Relations Council. I started with them back in October of 2018. Now, I came from a background of law enforcement. I worked for 30 years at the Plymouth Police Department, and I retired this last September. In my last 10 years, I was in the position of Deputy Chief of Police. And I had heard some of you were from the Brooklyn Park area, so we're neighbors in that aspect, our cities. What might be nice to do is to maybe just go around, at least we got the audio, to hear who's here, but then also what house of worship that you're representing here today, so we have an idea. So if we start with Muhammad.
Yes, my name is Muhammad Al-Khatib, Islamic Center of Minnesota, and I'm also on the board of directors for the Al-Amal School. It's a private Islamic school here in Philly.
Very good, thank you.
Muhammad Mehdi, I'm the president of the Islamic Center in Brooklyn Center.
On Brooklyn Center, okay.
Yeah.
My name is Batul Mehdi, and I'm the vice president of the Anjuman Askari Islamic Center in Brooklyn Park.
Park, okay.
Marlene Ellaby, I'm from Mass University.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Ariana.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Mohammed Musa. I'm from the Science Islamic Center of St. Paul.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
My name is Muhammad Omar. I'm from Dara Farooq Group.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Nurgot Foy from Masjid al-Iman in Minnesota, Minneapolis.
Okay, thank you.
Glenna Titus, and I am the new, very new, finance administrator at ICM.
Excellent, thank you.
Imam Asad Zaman with the Muslim American Society of Minnesota.
Imam, thank you. I appreciate it.
Welcome to all of you. We're really
Yeah.
pleased you came.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity. Now, what I'll do is I wrote notes on the grant. You guys have some handouts. The one handout, that's the thicker handout, is the one that has all the information in it that I'll be talking about today. What I wanted to do was take that information, condense it, and make sense out of it, right? And talk about it verbally with you as you could take notes. But then when you go back and read your larger document, it'll make a lot more sense to you, all right? Sometimes these documents coming from the federal government have a lot of information that pertains, doesn't always pertain to you, but it might pertain to the state, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, okay? So there's some of that information that doesn't even matter to you, okay? Then the other document that you have, the one that's a 6-page document, or the thinner document, is called a investment justification form, all right? That's the official name. It's your application, all right? So that's the application form that you're going to be filling out. It's a 6-page form. In a sense, it's fairly easy, and we have more forms coming for those who don't have their forms yet. So they're coming downstairs. We're making extra copies. We really don't need to be looking at the forms as I'm talking. You can if you wish, but it might be hard to follow. So I think it might be best if you just want to take notes, listen, and then if you refer to your documents later, it'll all make sense. But I just wanted to introduce the two pieces of paper that you have in front of you, so you're not having to go through them and thinking that you have to leaf through them as I'm talking and try to find information, so.
And Dan, can that form be filled out electronically online, or do you
Yes,
print
and
it
that's
out?
the preferred method. It'll be filled out electronically online.
Okay.
I had sent everyone, I think that was gonna be coming, and let me know if you got it or not, but I sent out these forms electronically too. Now, if you didn't get them electronically, talk to me, and then I can get your email address after we're done today, and I could send you the forms electronically so you have them,
It
right?
was on the invite, if you got the flyer, it was included on the email with the
Yeah,
flyer.
it's very easy for me to send these forms out. Along with that form, if you received that email from me, was a webinar that I sent also. So you could also watch that webinar, and it tells you how to fill out the applications, what to do. Basically a repeat of the information I'm talking about today, but helpful, right? Because it repeats the information we talked about, and obviously whenever you write notes and you get back and you start to read, at least this is for me, what did I mean by that? The webinar will help, okay? So those are, I sent out documents plus a webinar to those who have not received it yet. So what we'll do is we'll get started. If you have any questions as we're going, please let me know. You can just speak right out and I will answer them. Your question, if you think it's a silly question, please don't think it is, because it might be a question that someone else is thinking about and it benefits the group. In fact, it might even be a question I never got before, and I might have to do some research to get you an answer, right? But that being said, it benefits the whole group. So, yes, sir.
So was that a document in an Excel sheet? Was it Excel? Is that the one that came in Excel?
Correct,
format?
that's the one.
The
that came in
application itself is an Excel sheet,
This is
correct?
a spreadsheet.
That is exactly right, yeah.
Correct, yes, that was your Excel spreadsheet that you received. Yep. So here's the purpose. The purpose of this grant, now it's called the 2019 Federal Nonprofit Security Grant Program. So if you ever see the NSGP, okay, that's that grant. It's going to provide funding for security-related activities to nonprofit organizations that are at high risk of terrorist attack. This grant also promotes emergency preparedness coordination and collaboration activities between public and private community representatives on a local and state level. That means said collaboration and working together with local law enforcement and local emergency management, okay? Now the funding, and this is across the nation, is $60 million that the federal government had set aside. $50 million of that, okay, is designated for urban areas. Now, this grant always used to be just for urban areas like the Minneapolis area and larger suburbs, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, you know. But now they've made outreach to the whole, out further in the state, saying that $10 million of that can be for the remainder of the state. That's not considered to be the urban area, okay?
So what's the extent of the urban area?
7-county area.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Everyone here in this room is eligible for the
For the
$50
urban.
million pot. However, if you have colleagues who may be in Rochester or Worthington or someplace else, they would be eligible for the $10 million pot. Now, I looked at the forms, and it looks as though they've budgeted, I think, $150,000 for Minnesota for that $10 million pool, okay? But the rest of, all of us here are eligible for the $50 million pool.
And what portion of that is designated for Minnesota?
Of the 50 million?
Well, yeah, well, that's the whole application.
They're not that clear about
process.
that.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the application and how that works through the state, because this is a federal grant. But that being said, the state has to apply to the federal government for this grant. We're considered to be sub-recipients, okay, like a subcontractor. So we apply to the state. The state takes our applications, they score them, and then they move them on to the federal government. So out of this room, for example, if this was the whole state of Minnesota, we all applied for the grant. Maybe 3 of us move on to the federal. Maybe the rest didn't score high enough or they didn't see a need by their parameters to move those forward. So let's 3 move on to the federal government and say the federal government now scores them and looks at them. Maybe one of us in this room receives the grant. Does that make sense? So there's no guarantee of who is going to get it, and they have to look at the footprint of who's got the most the most risk and threat to their organization. Also, they give additional points, we'll talk about that later, on a state level to those who have never received the grant before. So that's a really good bonus, and I don't think they've ever done that before. Now, each of the nonprofits that can apply for a maximum amount of $100,000. So of that 60 million, each of us can say, okay, we're going to apply for a maximum amount of $100,000. And that's the most you can get. Now, obviously, you can get less than that. It just depends on how they want to distribute the monies. Now, the performance period for this grant is going to be from September 1st. The performance period, I'm defining that as if you win a grant or you're awarded a grant, how much time do I have to spend this money? Okay, so that's considered to be the performance time. And that's going to be from September 1st of 2019, because that's when they're going to be awarding this, through August 31st of 2022. So it's a 36-month or a 3-year time period that you get to spend your money. So you don't have to spend it the first year. You can say, okay, I want to research what kind of cameras I want to get. I want to research what kind of materials I want to buy. Maybe the contractors are going to put them in. So you're not forced so much to start spending right away. Because it takes time to think about these things. And now that I have the money and I knew what I wanted, now how am I going to implement this, right? So that's why they allow that 3-year period.
Now, of course, if it's a camera that you choose to buy or something like that, it will have benefit to you well beyond 2022.
Correct.
You don't have to like rip them out, right, and give them back to them. But yes, they don't want you to take forever to figure out what kind of cameras you want to buy. But that's actually a very generous amount of time.
Yes, it is.
It's really, yeah.
Yes. Now, for the application, or your investment justification form, that's what it's called, it's your application. Each of us, nonprofit organizations, have to apply through the state, okay? And in fact, I could even send you, what I'll do, maybe we could send around a piece of paper and everybody could put their email address on it. If you wouldn't mind doing that, Anthony, possibly.
Sure.
And then what I'll do is I can send this, what I'm reading off, to you also, so that you have this form and everything that, that you have. You can obviously feel free to take notes, but it's certainly nice to have this too. The other form will show you a lot of this information, but I want to make sure you get the simplified version too. Okay? So, an important note is that we're going to be applying to a person by the name of Miss Michelle Schlosser. She is the grant administrator for Minnesota Homeland Security. Now, her first name is spelled M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E. The last name is more difficult, Schlosser, S-C-H-L-O-S-S-E-R. Now, she's considered to be the state administrative agency, okay, the SAA. So if you see in your applications or your paperwork the SAA, that's Michelle. She represents the state of Minnesota, so we apply through her. Okay? So you can go to the Minnesota Homeland Security website, right, and then download the information to apply and send it in through her.
So is that a state law enforcement agency? Is that part of DPS or?
That's an excellent question. It's part of DPS, but it's the State Homeland Security and Emergency Management Group. So it's the state level of the National Department of Homeland Security, but on a state level. So, excellent question. But it is a part of DPS. Correct. Now, the deadline to submit your application is May 10th. May 1st is tomorrow. It's very narrow time period to be able to get this done. That's
So the deadline is tomorrow?
No,
No,
May 10th. But I was saying
it's bad, but it's not that bad.
May 1st is tomorrow, so basically you've got 10 days.
Yeah.
Right, to apply. Now, they announced this grant on April 16th originally. Okay, so there's not much more time for others to get this done either. So everybody is scrambling to make sure that they get this done. It seems to be typical that they do this. And this is just extra information for you, but I had learned that the fiscal period for the federal government is starting in October, and they go all the way through September. So they announced the grants in September, now in October they're ready to start their new grant period. I don't know why they wait so long until April to let us know. that
Because it
it's
takes them see,
forever to get it.
I'm the political person, and so
Okay.
the reason is it takes them forever in Congress to make a decision about how much money is going to be in the grant program. So we didn't know until really this month, would it be $50 million? Would it be less? Maybe a little bit more? And so because of the just basic dysfunction of the federal government, we are all kind of in this position of scrambling. We know that this year is going to be challenging for everyone here to apply. However, this is a program which has existed since, Anthony, what, 2006?
7.
7. So once you figure out the process now, this knowledge will be, if you're not successful this year, or just it's too taxing, will be very useful for the following year. Because it's most likely going to be materially the same application, the same roughly amount of money. They tweak it, but it's roughly the same program year in and year out.
Right. So it's very worth your while to apply, okay?
Even if
Because
you don't get it this year.
if you don't get it this year, right, exactly, that you could get it the next year. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Very important to note that the state of Minnesota awards 10 extra points on the scoring system for those who have not received it or was turned down in the past. So that's really that's good that they're doing that. So important to know, okay? So that's why it's really important for you to apply. Now, the deadline for the state to submit their applicants that they choose to the federal government is May 29th. So they also have a quick turnaround time to make this decision. So they're also scrambling, all right? And then the federal government will announce the grant awards no later than September 30th. So being the fact that your time period to start spending your money is September 1st, they might not announce it until September 30th at the latest, right? So really kind of, it might not be truly 36 months, it might be 35 months if they're late in letting us know, okay? Now, what do you need to do on your application? There are a couple really important, or a few very important items that you need. Are you familiar with what's called a DUNS number? D-U-N-S. A few of you are shaking your heads, which is good. That's called a Data Universal Numbering System. If you don't have one, very easy to get one, okay? And basically, I wrote down a definition of this. It's a proprietary system, okay, so it's owned by Dun & Bradstreet, that assigns a unique numeric identifier referred to as a DUNS number to a single business entity, and it was reduced in 1963 to support Dun & Bradstreet's credit reporting practice. So it's a standard worldwide, okay? So they need to have that number. Now, here's a phone number you can call to be able to get a Dun & Bradstreet number or a DUNS number. It is 1-800-903-0264. And this will be a 9-digit number that they give you. Okay. That is going to be, that's extra information I'm giving you. I'll send that out in this form to you, the one I'm reading from, okay? I don't think that they have that information in that form. They'll talk about it. They'll say, you'll need a DUNS number, and you go, what's a DUNS number? But I'll send this information to you so you know what that number is. There's also a website that you could also apply for a DUNS number, but that's going to waste your time, in a sense that it takes longer to do so. I talked to one person already who called this number to get a DUNS number. He said it took 30 seconds. Perfect. I just don't want you to, if we do this other website to get it, I don't know how many days it'll take.
Right.
So if it takes 2 or 3 days, that's, now you got 7 days to get your application done. I mean, obviously you could work on your application in between,
Yeah.
but I just don't want that particular piece to slow you down,
Right.
right? So, but that's the number you call, 1-800-903-0264.
So if we have a DUNS number that we haven't used for more than 5 years, is it in good standing or?
It's in good standing. Once you have a DUNS number, it's always assigned to you, that's your number forever.
Okay.
So, yes.
In theory, we have a DUNS number.
Very good. Yeah, if you got it right, yeah, I know, you gotta find it and look it up, exactly. Or call that number and let them know the name of your institution. They could probably look it up and find your DUNS number, right, if you're not sure. And then you can go from there too. So that would be a good repository, in essence, to give them.
And they're
a
open
call.
like regular business hours, like
What was
regular
that 800
business
number
hours.
again?
Yep, number once again, yep, 903-0264.
Is there any specific information that we have to have available when we call?
That's a good question.
That I don't know. It's a very good question. I'm assuming they're going to be asking the question if you're going to be a 501c3 organization, because they want to identify that you're a nonprofit.
Okay,
I don't know if they're going to talk about any other financials and things that you need to do.
okay.
They
I
will
would-
ask for your tax ID number, they
Yeah.
will ask for your business classification number.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Excellent. Because the other gentleman said, you know, it only took him 30 seconds, but obviously he must have had that stuff ready. But it must be a fairly easy process without a
Yeah, I
lot of
think that, yeah.
paperwork, right?
They will ask the political board and stuff here.
Oh, they will? Well, that's interesting too. Okay. Now, another very important piece to the process to be able to even apply is that you all have to be, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So you have to be registered as that, right? Now, important, Internal Revenue Service doesn't require churches, synagogues, mosques, or houses of worship to apply to receive recognition of exemption. You're already exempt. But you must have some kind of a number, I would assume, that's assigned to you when you applied, right, to become that nonprofit group. Now, in your information, your thicker packet that you have, you're going to read in there that you have to register for a SAM number, S-A-M. You do not have to do this. That's one of those items I was talking about before. The state has to register as that SAM recipient to represent all of us. We don't have to touch that. And that's really nice about this, because the state has to do a lot of paperwork and a lot of jumping through hoops, so to speak, to be able to get this done. We don't have to do it as sub-recipients. It's just that application. This one's very important, and I believe it's on the application, but each organization is required to have a mission statement.
Okay.
Okay, and if it's not on the application, I believe it is, you have to attach it to it as a separate document. And you must include your mission statement and any mission implementing policies or practices that may elevate the organization's risk. Okay, so that'll explain that in that thicker,
If you don't have a mission statement, Dan, can you just create one for the purpose of the application?
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
We stand for this in our house of worship organization.
We educate children or,
Yes,
you know,
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you are local, you might have a regional group that represents you or a national group. They probably have a mission statement, so you can kind of take their mission statement and move it around a little bit and make it yours,
Okay.
right?
This is not the most critical piece of the application, correct? The mission statement. You need to
No,
have one,
You
but,
just need to have one.
right,
Yes,
Can we ask questions as we go?
yes.
yes.
So, like, from those who apply historically, how many have received a grant? Is it like just a few percent, or is it the majority, or 50%?
Just a few percent, just a few percent.
We are at
After
a
we've got more.
competitive disadvantage, so I don't know, Dan, sorry, I was making copies. So they have designated urban areas, of which the Twin Cities is one of, obviously, many urban areas. And compared to cities like New York City, Miami, Chicago, Los Angeles, they receive the bulk of the money. So I have never seen in a given year more than 3 organizations receive money. However, and have you talked about
Not
the
yet.
state legislation?
Not
I don't
yet.
want to jump ahead. We're working on advocating for money at the state level as well to supplement the federal, because we see that there is a discrepancy of the need for the federal money and that we're not getting it to the state likely in
Right.
May of this year. And when the legislative session ends, we'll provide
And you don't
state
even
money.
have to think about the state legislation, because if it passes, and I think it will, by applying for this federal grant, you are also in essence applying for the state grant. It's the same application.
Oh, that's nice.
Because as Dan was saying earlier, there's a lot of work for the state to do to prepare us for federal application. They don't necessarily love doing more work, funny thing about people who work for government. And so asking them to have to administer multiple applications, it would have been asking a lot. And so essentially, what will happen is that they, as Dan explained, are going to score the federal application.
Okay.
Then they are going to forward that to the federal government, where we are going to be competing, the best couple from Minnesota, with the best couple from other metro areas. Those who get the federal money, as we say at JCRC, mazel tov, good for you, okay? However, we know that there are always going to be really good applicants who don't get that federal money. Not because the state didn't think they were good applicants, not because they weren't good applicants, but because compared to Chicago or Miami, it didn't make it. If this state money is approved, then what they'll do is they will award money from the state to the next in line.
Okay.
Could be the next couple, could be the next 4 or 5, depending on how much they requested and how much money's been appropriated. Yesterday, the House of Representatives for Minnesota, at 2 in the morning or something like that, approved the Democratic majority's public safety budget, which called for $600,000 for this supplemental program. $300,000 in the first year, $300,000 in the second year. And it's very important for us that there be money in both years of our 2-year budget cycle, because we know not everyone's going to be able to apply necessarily by May 9th, May 10th, right? In the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans who had less money, overall for everything, it was $300,000, $150,000 in the first year, $150,000 in the second year. The way it works, and Imam Zaman knows this, and Ann knows this, as people who are at the Capitol a lot, what's going to happen is there's going to be a conference committee where they're going to negotiate the differences between the House budget and the Senate budget. So I feel confident there will be some money. Probably the floor is $300,000 for the biennium, and the ceiling is $600,000. So the good news is, if this is approved, we will be able to hopefully expand beyond 2 or 3 who get money. It might be 4 or 5 or 6, if the state approves this. That's what I'm spending a lot of my time doing. And that's kind of why I'm here. So, and you, as an applicant, won't have to do anything, because by filling out this federal application, you've in essence applied for 2 pools of money.
Okay.
So it's less work for you.
So, and would it be accurate to say that in previous years, the total amount of money given to Minnesota is somewhere in the $300,000 range?
So it has fluctuated. When this program first started in 2007, you could apply for up to, I believe, $25,000. After that, it increased. Each institution could apply for up to $75,000. Now I believe the total is $150,000.
It's 100.
100,000.
$100,000 now. So depending upon, so it very much, Imam Zayman is in accordance with that. Most organizations typically do apply for the full amount. They have enough projects that they want funded. However, sometimes some institutions, we just want a camera system for $20,000, and that's what we want to include in this investment justification / application this year. So it's dependent upon the institution.
Just I want to share the hearings at the Capitol.
Yeah.
The committees were very understanding of the need for this. So there's something good and bad about that, I guess, right? That people are aware of what the concerns are, but it was clear that members of the committee understood. Both Dan and Anthony testified. JCRC's been the lead on this, JRLC's been supporting them, but the committee recognizes the challenges that our faith communities are having.
It's not easy to get very liberal Democrats and very conservative Republicans to agree on anything that actually matters, right? Other than we like mothers and, apple pie is tasty. So,
I have 2 questions.
yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
So, it's my first time too, so if I'm off the line.
No, that was,
Is this money only for security or?
Well, I'm gonna talk about that later, but yes, it's for physical security items, okay? And I'll unpack that a little bit later. And it's also now for the very first time for paying for subcontracted security guards, if not off-duty law enforcement officers security guards. So that's a great advantage with this.
And that's new.
And that's brand new.
Brand new.
And I'm really glad that they put that in there, because a lot of people were saying, well, it's only for physical security, but what about security guards? We want to be able to pay for those people. And I'm glad that they opened the door to that now. So I'll be explaining that in a little bit. Yes, very good question.
Okay, my second question is, since you mentioned that only a few percent receive the money, so that means the money, that money is not used, and it returns back to the federal?
Well, of those who don't receive, all the money gets used, it all gets awarded.
Okay, so somebody will receive it.
Somebody will receive it.
Just not in Minnesota.
It's just, yeah, it's just a small percentage within our state and other states that receive
Oh,
it.
okay.
They'll look at, bigger cities like New York and as having a bigger need. They have bigger congregations, they have, a bigger footprint. So it's more difficult for us. We're competing against sometimes faster runners.
It's more visible, huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Dan will get this too, and also the threat environment in which these cities are. And Dan will get to, proving threats that have targeted your facilities is a major component to getting scored well on this investment justification. And in cities like New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, their threat environments are much more dynamic and bigger than here in the Twin Cities.
So the synagogue that was surrounded at Charlottesville with those picketers,
Yeah.
very likely to score very high in this grant.
Well,
Yeah.
more likely to get more points, correct.
Right.
Now, this is something that you could do, since we're gonna talk about threats, right? You can contact your local police departments, because I'm sure at some point or another, you may have called your police department to report a suspicious vehicle or something that had happened. So what you want to do is call your police department and say, hey, within the last 5 years or 3 years, right, give me a list of the times that we had called you and what we had called you for. And then therefore, for your application, you can add that, for your threat assessment, saying, because it's documented. You're not making it up. I mean, the police departments have that.
And they are required to hold those records?
Yes, they're required to hold those records, and you have a right to those records by Minnesota state law. You can get that data from them because you are that institution, and they will give you those records.
Okay. Remember, Dan's background was 30 years he was the deputy chief of the Plymouth Police Department for the last 10 years.
Right.
So he was on the other side of the conversation, which is where, institutions in the community were asking for this information. So that's why we hired Dan.
And, and you all probably have really good relationships with your police departments too.
Or maybe.
Or maybe not.
We shouldn't make assumptions.
But what if we did not routinely call the cops for problems? We have excellent relations, but we don't make a point of calling 911.
Sure. If you have records, you don't have to turn your records in. You don't have to, get a list of all your records. But if you have records or you remember times that something have happened, make sure you're putting those in your description or your narrative, saying that on these dates we had these things happen. From now on, even if you don't call the police department, I would really encourage you to keep track, right? If it's just one person in your organization or you yourself, if something suspicious happens or you think it was a threat, I would make record of that. So that when it comes time to apply, it's easier for you to say, I've got this already done.
And also harassing emails, harassing voicemails,
Yes.
potential vandalism, whether it's property destruction or graffiti. If you have photo documentation of that, again, as Dan had said, please do report that to law enforcement in terms of tracking hate and bias
What about
motivated
Facebook
offenses.
threats?
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's a broad definition of threat.
Yes.
We were anticipating applying for this last year,
Yes.
and we found it very intimidating because it was not user-friendly to smaller congregations. You almost have to be Beth Israel or, huge, St. Mary's or something to even get consideration.
I don't disagree with you on that, but that also being said, I think that, and I hope, and I can't make assumptions, I hope that the state gives credence to the smaller houses of worship and organizations that have a threat level, the same of your bigger organizations. In fact, that makes them even more of a threat because you're small and you don't have the resources that these other bigger places have. And the fact that these other bigger organizations may have already received a grant in the past makes you more attractive also, right? So I think with all the years since 2007 this is going on, and this is just my guess, that I'm hoping at some particular point, the smaller organization, right, starts to get noticed,
Yeah.
right, and grants are issued in that manner too, right?
So to my understanding, this grant is available every year.
Correct.
It has been, yes, and I don't think it's gonna go away anytime soon,
Sure.
and that's
So
my guess.
was the highest number, was it, did you say 150,000?
Last year was
Last year?
150,000,
Last year.
and this year it was 100,000.
3 recipients, right?
I believe.
That is, last year in the state of Minnesota in 2018, there were 2 organizations that received money,
Two.
not 3.
150, so they got the max.
That's a very
75%.
good question. One I think was the max and one was not the max.
Yeah, one was 75, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, no, good questions, excellent questions.
I just want you to think that a lot of the work that you're going to be doing will be transferable in the next year, right?
Yes.
So when you think about the equipment that you want,
Yeah.
when you think about why you want that equipment or what you hope to get from it,
Yeah.
if you save that information, if you don't get the money the first time, and someone else gets the money, well, they're not going to be able to apply the people who got the money the next year. They already got the camera. They
Right.
already got what they were hoping for. And so then you're really not wasting your time, because for something that has been going on for so many years, eventually, and hopefully sooner than later, right, you will get what you're looking for if you are submitting a quality. I mean, of course, it's possible the threat will go away and the world will be a better place, but nobody here is counting on that, right? You wouldn't have all come if you thought like all the problems of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and racism, white supremacy, were just going to get better tomorrow.
And
right?
to that point, this also helps you organize and focus, not just on the physical side of security, but this will hopefully get people to think about creating an emergency and safety committee at your various institutions, and thinking about ways in which you could perhaps use ushers and greeters as a layer of protection at your institution. So this is a great way to kind of focus your energy in thinking about security, not just necessarily with your physical security needs.
And also your,
Just a question on that. We will apply for the grant to purchase these hardware equipment, but we are not, at least my organization is waiting for the grant to make us safer. So we already bought the equipment, and it's no longer a cost that can be applied for, right?
That's
Whatever
true.
happened in the past is
passed.
gone.
Yeah,
That's true.
it's supplanting, you can't pay for something that you
You already have.
have. But you can upgrade
Okay.
what you already have. Okay, so if you bought cameras 3 years ago and you wanted to upgrade to better cameras, and you know how quickly technology, 5 years, technology's already
Yeah.
gone, right? You can apply then to add to it and or upgrade.
I don't think anyone thinks that one piece of equipment, or even one person that you may hire, is going to be the silver bullet that's going to make you completely safe. And so maybe your first priority are those cameras, and you can't wait, and so you buy the cameras. But then if you have the cameras, then maybe you think to yourself, well, maybe a better door, or better windows, or something else.
Yes.
And so
Exactly.
a lot of your application will be not just about the camera, it will be about who you are as an institution and why you're at risk. And that knowledge, that information, that argument will transfer to whatever it is that you're asking for, to some extent.
And, in my opinion too, is you owe it to your congregations and to the people, because they might ask the question, why didn't you apply? So, I mean, it's just showing your effort to make that step towards increased security, whether or not you got that grant or not, you're putting that effort forward for the betterment of security.
Can we see an example of a successful application from the last 2 or 3 years to understand how those justifications are explained?
Very good question, but
We don't know.
I've already asked, someone asked this question before, and I had worked with another organization, but it's very private to that organization. They don't really want to share it,
Yeah, because it's their security plan, yeah.
right?
It's their security plan, I get it. It's
Exactly.
supposed to be secret.
So unfortunately, no.
Maybe we could work on like redacting like the Mueller report.
Do you have at least a figure of how many applications last year?
Somewhere between 10 to 15.
10 to 15 applications.
That is correct.
But another piece of that too is,
No, for just Minnesota.
Just the state of
And 2
Minnesota.
were
Minnesota.
approved.
Yeah,
But if a
Right.
lot more of us are applying, does that not show a bigger need for our state too, to show that we have a bigger need and maybe more states
To Dan's point,
are applying, so maybe the federal government goes, oh my gosh, look at this need, we're gonna put, you know,
Double it.
90 million, or we're gonna put, right, or we're gonna really have to increase this amount.
HSCM has
So-
advised us that the more organizations that apply for this over the course of time, they believe that DHS and FEMA will then allocate
Right.
more money to this urban area over time.
Let me also give you another political kind of reality check. The Democrats have not controlled either branch of Congress for some time, right? In the House, it hasn't been since 2010. Now, typically speaking, urban areas, the areas which get the bulk of the money, are represented by Democrats. So now that the Democrats, now that, we have not just Congressman Ellison, who was in the minority, but Representative Omar, who's in the majority, right? And Congresswoman McCollum is on the Appropriations Committee in the majority. Now that the Democrats are in control in the House, if they are hearing from their constituents that this is a priority for them, they're in a better position to increase the amount of funding than they were when they were in the minority. It's in some ways amazing we got as much money for this program as we did, considering that, for example, like the chair of the subcommittee in the Senate represented North Dakota, which couldn't even apply for any money. How they convinced him that this was a priority is because people are really good at their work, Now that's why you have the 10 million. For states like North Dakota, like there's no designated metro or urban area in the entire state of North Dakota. So if we see the benefit of this, then I think it's incumbent on, it's important for all of us to be having these conversations with our elected officials, so that they know this is something that they should be advocating for as a priority when the Democrats now, in the House at least, set the next budget.
And we've said this many times to the Jewish Community Relations Council, but security is really a common thread that unites all of us.
Yes.
And we really have to work together on this to be able to make our state and our houses of worship more secure, no matter what type.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. I think it benefits us all to be doing this together.
Yes.
I'd like to underscore Ethan's comments, not only on the federal level, but he's been working incredibly hard, and we've been supporting him, other groups have, to get the state funding. And so the same is true there, as they see what the need is around the state. If we want that to be a continuing program instead of just going with one-time appropriation, the more that they're seeing the challenges and the stories of what's really happening to congregations and faith communities in our state.
Absolutely.
And that helps advocate for more money at the state level as
I didn't
well.
want to be too self-serving and talk about my thing, but thank you, Ann.
I know a while ago you said that one of the groups that was accepted last year only used half of the money. So they only used 75% or $75,000 instead of like 150.
Well, they were only awarded 75,000.
Okay.
They only
so-
applied for
What do you
that.
ask for?
They only asked for that amount. They didn't ask for the full.
Plus, they got,
Okay, so when that happens, then is there like a potential waiting list or something so that all of the money can be utilized? Because somebody because they only applied for 75,000.
No, but the
And the
feds-
total
the feds
was-
approved the entire 50 million depending on other
It
activities.
That-
just
that
went
went
to
to
other
somebody
places.
else.
Yeah.
One of those
But-
states got
So
it.
that didn't.
Yeah,
People
It is
in
no
other states
leftover
got
money.
that money.
no
Well,
leftover.
okay, that's what I was not
There-
understanding
Where is the
for
leftover
sure.
money? Can I have
There is
There's
none. There is none.
You got it. There's
Yep.
never any leftover
So the
money.
federal government
Exactly.
retains it back.
No,
No,
the federal
no.
government
See, that's-
disperses all
There's
60.
no leftover money.
They will just select applications and disperse the 50 million to urban areas and the 10 million to other areas throughout the country. They disperse it all just based upon the
So
applications
what
that
if
they
an
receive.
organization doesn't use the whole amount that
Ah.
they granted?
They have 3 years to use it, and if they don't use it, I believe at that particular time, and this is not an assumption, that the federal government will say,
It still was, yeah.
Exactly.
It pays down the deficit, which,
I mean, and that actually takes me to the next point, which is more constructional. So how do you get the money? Do they give you the money up front, or do you submit receipts,
that's a
invoices?
great question.
they,
I mean, it's too much, we don't have to get into
I
that if you don't
believe that they
like
give
to.
you the money up front.
So they give you the whole money
But
and you
there's-
have to
but there's-
provide proof.
There's
But
project
there's-
management.
There's metrics that you have to go.
Exactly.
Once you get an award, they'll send you all the paperwork saying that you have to report, right? All these progresses that you make and how you spend the money, so you're responsible for that.
And those progress reports go to the state, correct?
I'm not sure on that. I think that those, I'm not sure. I can't say.
If memory serves me right, I think that actually you then get turned over to DHS and FEMA,
To
and there's a
FEMA's
portal
federal.
there that you apply
So what are they
through.
doing?
Right, and you've got a, yeah, you've got a password and that, and you do your reports on an annual basis, or, you know, and to say exactly how you spent your money and done that. So that's a whole nother piece if you're awarded it.
To the project management, I've been told in terms of scoring that the project management component and the threat component are two of the most important pieces of this investment justification.
Yes.
They really want to know who is in charge of this at your facility, that you have good milestones along the way of how you'll be spending the money, and that they know that in the end, the money that they are giving you is going to improve your facility from threats.
Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna back up the car a little bit, okay, and that's fine, great questions, but I wanna get us back to a point where we were talking about your mission statements. There's a reason why. Now, the state is the only one who's gonna get your mission statement. They do not send that on to the federal government, okay? The reason why is they wanna validate organizations in the following categories. They wanna say, are you either an ideology-based, spiritual or religious organization, or are you an educational nonprofit organization, which some of you may be both, right? Because if you have day schools and schools, right? Or are you a medical nonprofit, or they have another category called other, okay? But that's the reason why they want your mission statement, so they could put you into one category.
And the first category
or
is the
other.
best category to be in.
Yes.
Religious or ideology, okay, so.
For the threats.
For the threats, in terms of priority. So it's called a nonprofit security grant program.
Yes.
But overwhelmingly, the recipients are religious affiliated nonprofits. So if your nonprofit is about, cleaning up the environment, probably not gonna get the money.
Right.
But if you're one of us around the table here, then you're already in the best category, which, of course, you're in the best category because you're the most at risk,
Yeah.
right? So it's the other side of that double-edged sword, right? You're being poked, so at least you get the best benefit of getting the money.
Right, and unfortunate these events are happening.
Yes.
But the advantage for us than to be applying for the grant, right, increases our threat platform so that there's a better chance of getting some monies to help us, right?
Right.
Now, another very important piece that you have to have when you're applying for this grant is called a vulnerability risk assessment. A vulnerability risk assessment. And it has to be completed by a professional organization, okay, like a police department or a private security organization, okay? And we've done them for our community. Your community might have somebody that is in charge of security that could possibly do them as well. Police departments seem to be very forthcoming in doing these. Obviously, they want to make outreach to the community. That's what they're all saying, and the community is important to us. And we want to reach out, and we want to make these connections. What a better way to make a connection than if you guys call your police department and say, we've got this deadline on this grant, and we need a security risk assessment. Can you send over your professional to do this for us? They'll get your report, and this report also then gets submitted with your application.
And they don't charge for that.
They will not charge for that.
Would they do it this quick? I mean, there's not much time.
I can't answer that, it's not much time, but I think that there's an appetite, I think they're hungry to connect with the community.
Yeah.
And I think that if you, and I was saying before, if you have a relationship with your police department, calling your higher level administrator, if you know the chief, or if you know one of the commanders very well, talk to them about it, and they can make it happen better for you than just calling up the number and saying, hey, I need this risk assessment, and you kind of get lost in the bureaucracy of a police department, right? You may not get a phone call back. If you know your higher level officers or your chiefs, call them. And I think that they'd be more than willing to help you in getting this accomplished.
The Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, for those of you located in Hennepin County, they also will provide free assessments. So yes, you're local, the Hennepin
Good
County
point.
or Ramsey County, and I also want to give one more resource for you. And some of you back in 2017 might have been at a meeting that I was at. It was at the Hennepin County Sheriff's Public Facility. and a presenter there, his name is Mike Christensen. He's with the Department of Homeland Security. He's what's known as a protective security advisor. Every state has protective security advisors, and they work with schools, religious institutions to do these assessments. So his name is Mike Christensen. He can be reached at Michael, Michael .Christensen, CHRISTIANSON at hq.dhs.gov.
So really short, easy email.
But he has
911.
he has told me that he will go anywhere, anytime. Now, obviously, there are a lot of demands for his time as well, but that this is where Ethan and Dan have talked a lot about building this ground, the framework right now. So if it can't happen necessarily in the next 2 weeks, these are just great resources for you
Right.
moving forward.
No,
And when Dan emails this information out, we can include Mike
Mike
Christensen's information in that as well.
He wants
Oh,
to start.
absolutely, yes.
Because I need to leave early.
Oh, absolutely, you bet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're getting closer too, so that's good. For you, so what can you apply for? Okay? I talked before about equipment, the physical security items, okay? Now, how do you know what items you're able to apply for? In that bigger packet I gave you, the thicker one, they're gonna mention an AEL, an authorized equipment list. The government has set exactly the items that you can apply for, okay? And they give it a code to a number and letter code, exactly what you're applying for. So it's actually very easy to use. You could even just Google FEMA AEL and that list will come up, okay? And in the search, you could just put cameras and it'll flip up to cameras and it'll give you the code number for that, okay?
Dan, I'm going to stop you for a minute. I haven't seen the list come all the way around, so
I
whoever
have it
has.
here, but we had some other.
Oh, did it? Yeah, so I'm going to just send it and make sure we
Sure.
capture everyone.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Maybe on the backside might be full.
This is from the email that we talked about.
Important to note for that list,
Is this the list?
you're not gonna be able to find your security guard and your officer or security person on this authorized equipment list, because it's for equipment, not for people, right? Next year, it sounds like they're gonna give the people a code number too, okay? It was just in their hurry to say, okay, we are gonna allow this, that they didn't even think about giving it a code, okay? So in your application, on section 4, there's gonna be a box. It's called target hardening. You're gonna see down here, obviously, here's all the listings of what you're gonna want if you want it, and there's a place for the code, okay? There's no place for the security guard. You can just write in security guard. But up here in your narrative, you explain that we want a security guard that's gonna be available for 3 hours on a Sunday, on a Saturday, on a Wednesday night when we have classes, those types of things. You could break that out in your narrative section, okay, and that's just fine, they'll accept that, just so you know that. So if you're looking for that code for the security person, you're not gonna find it, all right?
So we just write it down? We just put security?
You just
guard?
write it down, yes, security officer, yes,
So there, the AEL then will be empty.
correct. The AEL number will be empty, exactly. And some of you may want equipment and a security officer, or you just might want a security officer, that's fine, so you can go ahead and do
Do we
that.
have to submit separate applications if we have more than one facility?
No, well,
Are the facilities under one
An
501c3 or are
They're
they?
one 501c3, but we have three congregations in like 3 different cities.
Some sort of budget of what that would cost. Right?
It shows you have a plan, and they want to see that you have a plan for this
Right.
money, right? You're being mindful and thoughtful of how you want to spend it, so that's important.
I
What
think, from my perspective, from my synagogue, we don't have
Yes.
security there 24/7.
Right.
But we do in certain times of the year,
Okay.
because we know, like the.
What if your budget throughout the 3 years is more than the 75,000? Could it be partial? Could the 75,000 be used as a partial budget for the grant?
You could,
Like, for example, talking here about Islamic school, for example.
Mhm.
We're looking maybe 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at dismissal. Or maybe an hour and a half, an hour and a half.
correct,
So it's almost 3 hours, 15 hours of security guard a week.
yes,
That's 60 hours a month roughly.
correct.
When you go over the 3 years, the budget might be higher than the 75,000. I think it will be right on line.
It might be, but that would help to augment it, but it also shows, I think, the fact that you're putting your money into it too.
Sure.
Right.
So is that normal to show that the grant is gonna be used?
Well, remember, this is the first year that you can use the money for human beings, right? For all the years of the program in the past, it was for a camera or a door, an inanimate object, right? Animal, vegetable, mineral, it was minerals, right? So now, you're, for the first time, saying a person, but maybe the way I would do it is that we want to fund this for the first year to show the benefit to the community, because we think this could leverage private sources of money or other.
Well, this is,
Coincidentally, that was the main
It's a pilot.
subject of the school board last week.
okay.
I didn't
Okay.
even know that was coming this way.
This is very important to know,
Sorry.
though, with the security piece, really
Yeah.
important. If you win the grant, you must be able to show that you're gonna sustain this capability in future years without grant money. Okay, so you gotta say, okay, in 3 years, we're gonna have this person, but after that time runs out, we're gonna be able to put our own money to keep this particular program going by hiring this security person. They want you to become now more self-sustained, right? And start to be planning and thinking about your own funding then for this type of position. It's more of a temporary grant position.
But that's not unusual when you apply for a grant from a private source or elsewhere from the government. It's like seed money, right? It's like proving, it's a pilot. It's proving that there's a merit worth to this.
Right.
And then once people in the community see the value of it, then it's easier. But you have to start someplace, right?
Right.
So think of this as, if that's the direction you want to go in with a guard, with a person.
Yeah.
It's easier, of course, if it's a camera, because that doesn't hopefully retire in 3 years, right?
Right.
But if the person is what you think is most important, and I understand why you would think that, then you can say, we're going to use this to prove to our community, to prove to donors the value of this, and we believe that people will see it and that they will be willing to fund it going forward.
Yeah.
That's how I'd frame it. I don't know, whether I make arguments for a living, that's what I do, so that's how I'd argue it.
When they first talked about allowing to have security officers funded through the grant, they were only saying at that time that only 50% of your grant money could be used for security officers. And then they quickly changed that. And now they said 100% of the grant money that's given to you could be used for security officers. So I thought that was really good too, just so you know that. So if you want to say, I want to use my $100,000 all for a security officer,
Yes.
and you can prove it that you need that, then that's what you could do. Okay?
And again, if I was thinking about this and trying to tie the risk to the need, you could say, we found that during Ramadan we get more threats, right? I don't know if that's true. I hope it's not. But if it were true, I would put that in the application, that we find that for our more high profile, not only do we have more people there, but we're getting more of a threat, and that's why we would use our resources, which are not going to fund someone 24/7 for 3 years at these occasions, because we see that connection. I mean, I just don't think it's that different probably with the Muslim community as the Jewish community. We have a sense in our community, this attack that happened in San Diego, not only is it 6 months after what happened in Pittsburgh, but like, Passover is a big holiday for us, right?
Yes.
Shabbat is a time when there's going to be a lot of people there.
Yes.
The killer knew that.
Right.
Unfortunately, the people who hate us, they do their research in a weird, twisted way, but they find out where you're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the information I have to share. I mean, that's everything really that you need to know to get started. Now, with me sending you this extra information, right, with all the emails, you'll be able to get that link then, the preparedness manual, okay? And then you'll have my sheet here, and I'll get you that Mike Christensen's number and information also. And that should really be able to give you a really good start on knowing how to go forward. Now, that number I gave you before for Michelle,
Yeah.
she's your state grant administrator. She works from 6 a.m.
What was her name again? Michelle what?
Schlosser. I can't even say it. SCHLOSSER.
You said she works at 6 a.m.?
She starts at 6 and works to 3.
And what's her,
Such a Minnesotan.
She wants to be in the traffic.
She wants to be at the traffic.
what's her number again?
She wants to be available for you, right, to help you. Number
she's part of the Fajr program.
651 201 7451. And she can answer any of the questions you have. She's been pretty darn good about getting back to me right away. Now, normally sometimes I can't get to her before 3, but then the next morning she's got my answer back to me already and has been very good with that. So, yeah, she's the grant administrator for the state, yep. And she's the person that will be getting your applications and with a team scoring them and sending
Can
them.
you have the phone number again, please?
Absolutely. It's going to be 651 201 7451.
She's the grant administrator?
She's the grant administrator. So she's in charge of the whole grant process for our state in Minnesota that links them to the federal government. So she's your conduit, she's your pipe to the federal government with your
We can
application.
ask her any questions in regards to the application? Or
Yes, any
or should we
questions.
call you?
Well, she might be your two things. I can answer questions for you, and that's just fine. And a lot of times, depending on your question, I might have to call her anyway. But if you call her, number one, it shows how much of a need we have. Number two, if she hears your name, maybe more than once, whatever, that I'm calling, and then she sees your application, that's just name recognition, right? That you're well, I know, but I mean, I think it helps you, right, to be talking to her if you've got a question more so than me, going forward from here. So.
In section 2, I just wanted to provide a few tips that I have seen. Imam Zayman, you had asked about successful applications. So number 1 in that first box in section 2 about symbolic value. Mohammed, you were at a school, correct? Okay, so obviously children and the symbolic value of children being targets. That would be something that you should definitely speak about. But also geographic location as well, and what city you're located in. Are you potentially the only mosque in that city? Are you easily if you Google something, are you the first on the search engine optimization, things of that nature. Sort of, again, this threat environment in terms of building risk for your organizations. Number 2, describing any previous or existing role, your relationship within your communities about if there's a school that's a neighbor to your school, Mohammed, and if you have an agreement or a partnership, let's even say weather related, that if there was a tornado or something, that students could go to your school from another school that might be impacted by that. They want to know that you're an important community player within the communities that your organizations live, and that you're an open place for other communities, and that, again, in the event of emergency, that you can help out with other emergencies, not only impacting your community.
It's not always just school to school. So, for example, without disclosing, a past recipient of this money is a synagogue which has a relationship with public schools. Okay, so if those kids had to be evacuated from those public schools, they know they can walk to the synagogue, which is not that far away, and vice versa. Okay, so it's not, look, in an emergency, nobody really, you just need a safe place to be. It doesn't just have to be schools to schools or synagogues to government, police. Right, there's really 3 components. There's a threat environment, like what this is going to be for and why that addresses that threat, and that you are part of a greater, as Anthony said, team player, that you are, because this is coming from FEMA, right? So FEMA's mission, is like emergencies, disasters. They want to have a relationship with you. They want you to have a relationship with them, so that if there's a terrible, even not a violent incident, just terrible weather or something like that, that you are a resource that they can count on to supplement, to augment their ability as a government to respond to Minnesotans who are in crisis. I know, Dan, I think earlier said that Well, we hope that you have a good relationship with your law enforcement. I know it doesn't always work the same for every community. We know that. But we believe that most people in the Twin Cities, especially in the police departments, especially at the higher levels, they really do want to have a good relationship with all the faith communities. They do.